This presentation is going to cover aspects of biochemistry and the cell process. During understand basic biochemistry and cell processes, recognize this main idea of the cell theory, identify the structure and function of organelles, compare and contrast animal and plant cells. Quick chemistry review: atoms are the smallest part of an element. Molecules are one or two atoms bonded together, and there are three types of chemical bonds: covalent, which is a sharing of electrons, example a water molecule; ionic, which is an exchange or a transfer of electrons, like in salts; hydrogen bonds, which are attractions between molecules that have a slight charge on each end. Biochemistry is the chemistry of life. All living things contain biochemical molecules. Some of the main ones are carbon, water, oxygen, and hydrogen. There's a carbon atom or a methane atom where it has carbon in the middle and then hydrogens on all the bonding points. Life requires essentially 25 chemical elements. About 25 elements are essential for all of life: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, calcium, and potassium are the ones that make up the most of these. The top four are 96% of all living in matter, and the others are 4%. There's a little chart of naturally occurring elements in the human body and like the percentages. See, oxygen, carbon are pretty high. Then it drops down hydrogen, nitrogen, and so on until you get magnesium, 0.1%. Acids and bases: a compound that forms hydrogen ions, gives off hydrogen into water, is called an acid. A base is something that gives off hydroxyl ions, OH, when dissolved into water. There's a pH between 7 and 14, and acids have a pH between 1 and 7, or 0 and 7. Acid is a compound that forms hydrogen ions when dissolved in water. Hydrochloric acid. A base, a compound that forms hydroxyl ions. Sodium hydroxide would be an example. Your pH scale: neutral water is at 7, and then anything closer to 0 is different kinds of acids. You can see here on the list, stomach acid is pretty highly acidic, and then anything below 7, or higher than 7, I'm sorry, is going to be a base. Milk of magnesia, ammonia, oven cleaners, pretty strong base. Organic compounds contain the element carbon. Two important biochemical processes: dehydration synthesis, which is linking atoms together by removing water, and hydrolysis, which is splitting polymers when adding water. Organic compounds: four main types: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Carbohydrates are the organic molecules that store energy for life. Sugars and starches, three types: monosaccharides, mono meaning one, so it would be basically just a single sugar molecule; disaccharides, where you'd have a couple of them together; di meaning two; and poly meaning many, polysaccharides, like a starch. Monosaccharides are simple sugars, glucose, transported in the blood of animals, broken down to create and give off ATP, which is the energy of life. ATP is the electricity of life, if you will, the energy of that keeps all life's processes going. Disaccharides, with two monosaccharides stuck together, like sucrose, uh, sucrose like table sugar. Lactose is in milk. Glucose plus glycose, two sugars stuck together. Polysaccharides store energy for a little bit longer term. Starch stores glucose in plants. Glycogen stores glucose in animals in the liver. Glycogen. Starch and cellulose differences. Okay, starch is something that we can easily break down into simple sugars to use for energy, and it all comes down to the, if you see here and here, there's a slight different bonding. We can break this bond down. We have enzymes to break this bond down to get the sugars alone. We do not, humans do not have enzymes to break these sugars down, so we can't separate the glucose out and get and utilize it. That's the difference between cellulose in plants that we cannot use, and glucose or starches like flour and that we can use. Amylose enzymes breaks is needed to break down the starch. So we have an enzyme that breaks this down. We do not have an enzyme to break down cellulose. Polysaccharide structure. Chitin is exoskeleton of arthropods. Cellulose, most abundant carbohydrate in plants. Animals can't break down cellulose. Cows, buffalo, and so on have large rumens where they have bacteria that helps them break this down. Animals that eat plants have a hard time getting the energy from the plants, but they've figured out ways to do that. Cell walls have a lot of cellulose in them to help strengthen them and make them strong. Another use of it, long chain of sugars, cellulose. Lipids are molecules that have long-term storage of energy, insulation and protection. Fats, oils, phospholipids, steroids, and waxes are all forms of lipids, especially what we think of as fats. Um, it's used to store energy for long-term storage. Fats are made from animals, provide insulation and energy storage in animals. Crisco and bacon grease. Oils made from plants provide long-term storage of energy in plants. Canola, vegetable oil, peanut, and olive oil. Lipids, fats, and oils are triglycerides containing glycerol. Fatty acids chains with the COOH group. With fats of oils form, the OH group reacts with the COOH group in the family of fatty acids through dehydration synthesis, and results three waters and fat for oil. Fatty acids on the top, and then there's a ester link to show how they just bond together, long chains of energetic molecules that can be utilized later if needed. Lipids, saturated fatty acids have no double bonds between them, and unsaturated have double bonds. They melt at lower temperatures. Plants and mandrill keep animal feet and ears from freezing, and a little bit healthier for us. The unsaturated, a little bit healthier for humans to consume. Lipids, animals use fat for long-term storage, energy storage, instead of glycogen. Glycogen is a fairly short-term storage, usually in the liver, and then if you don't need the energy and it sits around for a while, then it converts over to fats. Lipids, phospholipids help make up some of the cell membranes. Steroids Four ring change, testosterone, estrogen, cholesterol, which is bad for humans. Waxes and fatty acids with alcohol can help to lubricate some of the body joints and so on a little bit. You get wax buildup sometimes in your ear. Just another example of one of these things. Proteins, very important organic molecule. Structural proteins, storage, enzymes, very important enzymes. We think of proteins as muscles, but enzymes are a vast amount of proteins which control chemical reactions of life. Transport, hemoglobin, defense, antibodies, hormones, keep us regulated, and motion. Then that's the contractual muscle protein that we move around with. But motion proteins, muscles, and enzymes, all of these are very important. But enzymes, the chemical reactions of life, there's literally millions of chemical reactions going on in your body all the time, and they're controlled by enzymes. They're turned on and they're turned off by enzymes. Proteins are made up of amino acids, long chains like starches are made up of sugars. Proteins are made up of amino acids, and these all have an NH2 amino group and a COOH, a carboxyl group, and then some sort of a radical on the end that makes them different. How do organisms get proteins? They eat animal proteins is a main way that humans and animals get proteins. They're digested into, they break them down into amino acids, and then you rebuild them in your body for whatever you need. They'll be stored or floating around in the blood cell, and then they'll be synthesized in the cells to make whatever proteins the DNA commands. Proteins are structural proteins, create in the skin and other places where they're for structure. You got 3D coiling from the hydrogen bonds, alpha helix, every four amino acids, and a beta pleated sheet turns back on itself. Some of these proteins are very complex. Here's just a little example of a protein. Like you say, because of all the chemical reactions of this chain, they've kind of fold back on themselves, and they form a more of a globular thing. Even though they're a long chain of amino acids, they can cross link, like you can see here at the top. There's a cross-linking chain. It's why your hair is protein, and it's why some people have curly hair and some people don't have straight hair, because the genetic code in your body says make a connecting chain, and then that brings the hair back around and curls it. If you don't have that genetic code in your body, the hair is more straight. We've got yeah, here's a hemoglobin molecule, this whole big protein that has iron in as a little bit of part of it to help carry oxygen molecules. Or you have a collagen, which is more of a structural protein, where it you can see where how it twists up, that would add strength to it. So there's all kinds of uses for proteins, but again, one of the most important is for enzymes to keep the chemistry of life going. Protein structure is very important because it here we have it. You can see in a red blood cell where they've got this little cone-like place for an oxygen molecule to fit into. Uh, here's the amino acid chain that is normal, and then one little amino acid being wrong or different or out of sequence causes the cell to sickle, and this is an example of a sickle cell. And this sickled half moon uh, shape is not going to be able to carry molecules, and then you have someone with sickle cell anemia. So denaturing of a protein loses structure, breaks down, pH shifts, high salt concentrations, and heat can make a protein break down. So here we have a normal protein, and then you have some process going on causes denaturization, and then the protein is just back to kind of a long chain, so it's not in the shape that it needs to be, and it doesn't do the function that it was designed to do. Nucleic acids are long chains of organic molecules that store genetic code. They contain our genes. They're found in the nucleus of all cells, and these pieces are called chromosomes. Here we have an example of a sugar and a phosphorus and a nitrogen base. There are four different nitrogen bases that can hook on here. It's kind of like a ladder. This would be the side of the ladder, this would be the rung, and then the nitrogen base actually is the rung, and then the sugar and the phosphorus make up the sides of the ladder. So we've got sides of the ladder and half a rung, and then it will attach to another um, nucleic acid like it almost is here, and there'd be another sugar and a phosphorus, and then that would be the other side of the ladder.